no rules! Do the lower score! There's one rule!
What's going on, everybody? Scott and Jack inside the putting lab here at Franklin Bridge. It's the No Mulligans podcast. Thank you guys so much for watching this year. We've had a huge showing for our Breaking 90 podcast that we put out.
Massive.
I have had multiple people either over Instagram or in the pub have been like, Jack, when is Breaking 80 dropping?
I know, I was about to say the same thing. You just like, when's the Breaking 80? Well, it's not this podcast.
It's the next one. But I will say that we are going to be talking about some things in this podcast that could be very helpful towards Breaking 80. So don't tune off this podcast just yet. We've got some important stuff to show you guys. But before we get into our topic for the day, we're here in the putting lab at Franklin Bridge, and it's currently like 3 o'clock. And we're normally recording at night, so if you're watching on YouTube, thank you to everybody who does watch on YouTube. You can see us here in the putting lab, people going in and out of Franklin Bridge behind us, and a lot of new things coming your way on the No Mulligans podcast and from Franklin Bridge. So more to come on that in the coming months, but we're calling this one March Madness.
That's right.
Why are we calling it March Madness, Scott?
I haven't done this since 2021 was the year that I did it.
Yeah.
Where it's an Instagram voting thing. Like, I'm going to create brackets. You can fill out your brackets. But is for us to look at it and go, all right, we're going to have 4 regions, 16 teams in each region, just like the real March Madness.
Yeah.
And it's a things they say, things they wear, things they do, and things they buy. And it's the whole goal is we're going to vote on Instagram. You're going to pair them against like however the matchups are, and everybody votes each day, and then the next day, and the next day. But it's to look for what's the number one way you can recognize a bad golfer, right? Like somebody who is bad at golf. Not somebody who's necessarily rude or mean, just like somebody who is bad at golf. So like, what are the things they say? What are the things they wear? What are the things they buy? What are the things they do? And so, last time we did this, so it would have been 3 years ago, 21, 22, 23, almost 20. Yeah, basically 4 years ago. The winner was range balls. They play with range balls on the golf course. Like, you can guarantee that somebody's a bad golfer if that's the thing they pull out at any point in the round. You're like,
that's it. Yeah.
That's
that's you.
I don't have to know anything else. If that's it, you are a bad golfer.
That's such a good one, too.
Well, I just don't hit it, I just happen to have one in my bag. Well, if you don't have enough golf balls, like you're clearly down to like the only thing you have left is range balls and the fact that you would even put them in your bag. So that was number one. So we have things like they take their clubs into the pro shop. Like that was a big one. That one went a long way. Iron head covers lasted a long time.
Yep.
Cargo shorts, like that's just a fashion faux pas. Trying to think some of the others we had.
We had the trifold towel.
Yep, that trifold towel that somebody buys you with the little clip that goes on the golf bag. You're like, nope, that's not it.
Which I don't know how those even got invented in the first place because they're not even good towels. They're not even usable.
No, they're really not. Like, if you want to take it up to the green with you, especially if you're playing cart golf, you're like, I have to like detach it and take it up there, and then you take it up there, you can't like open it up very far. Like
they're always like a microfiber material that like won't clean a golf ball. It's anyway. So we're gonna be talking about March Madness, what you guys can expect on Instagram when we are gonna do the voting. We're gonna put it out, and we also wanted to make sure that we did this podcast so that you guys can vote. So Scott's gonna be putting up a poll here on Instagram after this goes out for you guys to put in your submissions. So hopefully what you guys are suggesting can end up in the March Madness.
I think what I'll do is I'll start it. It'll start in April next week, but we'll start it Wednesday of next week because March Madness isn't done, right? So like it'll still continue, and we'll basically time it where we're voting every day. Then we know who's next, and we'll just start the voting for the next. So
perfect.
Be done pretty much when the tournament's actually done.
Perfect. And so to start this podcast off, I know we're titled March Madness, but the reason why we titled it is number one, to make sure that you guys can put your submissions in, and number two, March is about the time where people who do not play the game as much as some of the diehards are finally starting to come into golf season. So March Madness is going to be about how we can start to kickstart our year in golf and really make sure that we're hitting our stride when the prime of the season comes along.
Well, I think one of the obvious ones, right? This is easy. So this is, for those that listen to this, most of you are already consumers of our content and probably take lessons in a lot of ways, whether it be here or somewhere else in the world. But is starting out the year, before you hit your first golf ball, go and take golf lessons. Like, go ahead and start down the right track. Like, you've hit a few balls to start this year, but you just came for your first lesson yesterday, really, of the year. And so to, like, really dive in and do that kind of thing. So, like, that's the first piece of advice is just start out fundamentally sound. Just get that going. Know what you need to work on so you're not just coming out here and just, okay, I think I remember what I worked on last season. Like, your habits are going to be the same. But, like, let's get a refresher, start out, get it going. And our tee sheet, our lesson sheet shows that, right? We're really full right now. So those are good problems to have.
If somebody is either not accessible, if somebody either doesn't have Franklin Bridge accessible to them, if they are somewhere else in the country, somewhere else in the world, or they just don't come to Franklin Bridge, period, how should they say to a teacher? How should they find that teacher? And then what should they say to that teacher in order to get them into the swing of the season?
That's a really good question. I want to figure out how I answer this because there's a couple different ways I can answer it.
While you're thinking here, I'm just thinking about how you're thinking, and it's got to be tough because every single student is different. So you're probably trying to think in your head right now, well, what are some questions that we can ask regardless of skill level to really make sure that we're put in a better place when we leave that lesson? Because the last thing we want is to get worse when we go and take that first lesson.
Right. And you know, we've talked about this in some previous podcasts earlier this year, but is like, give the instructor that you go to see, like, really make every attempt to do what they ask you to do. Like, really commit to it, regardless of how good they are or aren't, or what you can afford or not, right? So the way we typically look at it is, like, think about the students that they teach. Like, look at their history as a teacher in terms of, do their students get better, right? Don't just look at the reviews online. Like, those are helpful. I get a lot of reviews I get a lot of referrals off of that. But it's like, are the people ask around. Like, that would be the first one to do, is ask around, right? Like, they will tell you who's good, right? You'll kind of get an idea of, like, give me 2 or 3 that I can look at. And it may be in a place you're not sure, right? Like, I think our team's great here. Like, when we have the record to prove it, but it's also not just about, like, who they currently teach, because there's some people that are really good at marketing in any business. It's not just golf, right? They're really good at, like, getting people in, but it doesn't mean they're actually really good at developing and making them better. And 100%. So, like, look how good this player is. Like, yeah, they're already good when they showed up to see you. So, like, there's some measure there of, like, do their students go from better, from worse to better? Do they hit it better? That's just a hard one for me to answer because I don't want to put any other instructors down, because I used to suck as a teacher. Like, that's, like, I don't suck anymore, but I have students I struggle with, right? Like, that's just the reality of it.
And I think another way to look at it is I've been reading Butch Harmon's book, The Pro. And
per my recommendation.
Yep, per your recommendation. And one thing that he says is he never gets mad when one of his tour players leaves him to go to another coach. He always says, that's a part of the game, is I don't have all of the secrets of golf. If they feel like they need to go another place in order to find that, all the power to them. So I bring that up to say, if you go and take an initial lesson with somebody, don't feel like you're stuck with that person. You can always go and try and find another teacher that you think will teach you better. Just because you're one lesson deep with one pro does not mean that you have to go see them 5, 6, 10 times to be better. If you do not feel like you're improving, go see another instructor.
Or even if you're 5 steps in, right? I always look at the first question of, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, am I actually being a good student? Like, this is one of the challenges I put on Elijah and Erica is, hey, I want you to give your next lessons. This is over the winter. I said, I want you to send me before video and after video. If it didn't change, then there's no learning that happened, right? I need to see a tangible difference before start and finish. Now that could be somewhat on the teacher, it could be somewhat on the student, right? You can do the same with me. Like I do have students that you're like, that doesn't really look any different. I was like, yeah, it's not. Why? Well, either most of the time it's not because I don't know where to go. There could be a lot of resisting from a student, right? So like I'm always, the ownership is both on the teacher and on the student. Like if you're a bad student, if you're not sure if you're a bad student, ask your teacher directly, like, am I a bad student? And don't BS me, like tell me the truth.
And if their answer seems a little around the corner, you probably also have another thing that you're figuring out.
Right. Like you want them to be fairly direct with you about like, that's not it. Like, here's how we get there.
And I think before we move on to our next topic here, my last point on this topic is I think that there's two things. I think you have to find a teacher who is a good teacher and who can make you better at golf. That, of course, is priority number one. But priority number two is I think that depending on your relationship with the person that you trust with your golf game, I think that relationship also has a lot to tell about where you will go in the future. For example, our relationship. I trust you and you trust me to a point where we're able to then figure out some things, go maybe an atypical route to find an answer and then be better off because of it, like my pivot leg.
Right. And you even got to watch me with Erica a little bit at the end of us hitting balls up on the range today of like understanding, okay, let's not look at this through the lens that we used to look at it through, both of us, right? Like you teach somebody for a long period of time and, she's not competing anymore. So that helps on both sides, right? There's no pressure on either side to perform. And so in a lot of ways, like that allows for a much better learning environment. And so it's like coming in with no pressure. Sometimes those are the hardest lessons to give is when there's a lot of pressure riding on it, right? Like whether it be a college student or a high school student or Elijah has a high-end client whose parent played, professionally on the European tour. Like there's a lot of pressure riding on that. And like that makes it difficult for the teacher to teach well. So it's trying to figure out how do we remove and deflate those tensions that are there. So, and sometimes here's the other part of the picking the teacher. Sorry. So I do want to say this. Don't just look at who they teach now. Find out their history of who they learned to teach from. If they haven't taught from anybody or learned to fit from anybody, I would be careful. I'm not saying they're bad. I would just, ask more questions would probably be the right thing to say there. It's like, ask more questions because that matters, right? They're just going to view it through their lens. I mean, I taught you a whole different style of swinging the golf club that you haven't heard of me teach yet. And you're like, wait, like this doesn't fit because you've learned a lot of different styles being around me. Yeah. This was like way over in left field. Like, wait, what is this?
Well, and to be fair too, we have such a relationship to where when you told me to, hey, I'm going to take you down this path, I was like, all right, let's go. Right. And that is also a part of being a good student as well. Of course, not trying to pump my tires, but if the
relationship is good, so correct. So it's easier to do.
Correct. But if I was to resist that way of teaching, I'm not getting any better after that lesson.
Right.
So that's something you have to be a good student, and you have to make sure that you're doing your vetting to find a good teacher.
Yeah.
So.
No, it's. I think that's a challenge. I think people legitimately have those complaints. Like they've gotten worse going to golf instruction. Like golf instruction still has this stigma of being too technical or have too many things to think about. A lot of that's on the student, but a lot of outside input and advice. And like it's got to be simple. If it's not simple, then I'd be careful.
All right, so we're warming up here for the season. We've found our teacher. We've gone to a few golf lessons. Mm-hmm. What is the next step to playing good golf this year?
You have to practice. Like you can't just go take a golf lesson and then go play 3 days later and expect to play better.
Yeah.
With the exception of super high level either athletes and or students and or experience, right? Like Micah can take something, and Austin can, and DeMar, and you got to do this yesterday, which we'll get to in a second, and immediately put it into practice. Like, that requires a level of trust and awareness that very few people have in any craft that they're good at. Like, you have to really be in a very different headspace and body awareness space to be able to do that. So don't just, like, I have those lessons. Sometimes those are the worst ones. Like, I've had, we've told this story before. I had a lady I taught back in Birmingham, and she had never broken, I don't think she had ever broken 90. It's like 88 or 90, like super high 80s, and only once. And she came and took a lesson. I went back home. She was 2 hours away in Tuscaloosa, and went out and played and shot her personal best. But she didn't just shoot her personal best on 9 holes. She shot 38. I'll never forget this. And then the lessons she came back after that were the worst lessons ever. Terrible. Like, you would have thought I was the world's best golf instructor, and then you would have thought I was the world's worst golf instructor. Like, so, like, that disconnect there of achieving a lot very quickly, which I can do, is not, you've got to be careful with. Like, because you should hit it better when you do it right. Like, that fundamentally, go to any teacher, if you do the movement more correct, like, the ball should start to get hit better within a reasonable number of swings, 10 to 15, 10 to 20. You don't have to get worse before you get better. You have to get a little uncomfortable, but yeah, that's, I have no idea where I'm going with this.
I like where you were going there, and I think how I will add to that is I think that if you would like to get better at anything, but for the sake of this conversation, we'll say golf, you have to be willing to get uncomfortable. There's a lot of people who are just so willing to stay within their comfort zone, accept their current level of golf, and then, claim to their buddies that they're playing with, I never play like this, But
that's one of the things bad golfers say. Yes, I never play this bad.
That's definitely going to be in March Madness for sure.
That's on the list.
But I do think that you need that certain special headspace of improvement of, hey, I am currently playing like this. What do I need to do to change it? And as soon as you're honest with yourself, you're going to be practicing a lot more. You're going to see a lot more improvement in your game, and you're going to see your scores drop. So you just have to be honest with yourself, make sure that you're practicing what you need to, and see your golf game for what it is.
Yeah, and I think that's a challenge for anybody, right? It's we're looking at us doing some sim league stuff in here, and people are like, Scott, what's your handicap? I was like, I haven't had a handicap since college. Like, that's how little I've played. I don't know, like, well, you've shot 68 out here. I was like, yeah, I've shot 68 out here, like, once. I've also shot 84 out here in a tournament. Like,
yeah.
Which player's going to show up? And, like, if you're asking to put me in competition, probably going to shoot fairly high. Like, my handicap's probably 6, 7. There's parts of my games my handicap's probably a scratch, but there are parts of my game that my handicap's probably a 10 or 11. So it's like my strategy level of awareness is very high, so I can kind of fight it around and make the bad stuff not kill me. Unless you put me on a hard golf course.
Well, and to your handicap point as well is handicap, of course, is a conglomerate of a bunch of different statistics, but I guarantee you if you put yourself in a situation where, let's say you're playing against somebody in your group or you're playing match play or something, handicap doesn't matter. You're going to beat them because you know how to play. And so your handicap might be high right now in terms of your swing, but your handicap is definitely way above scratch in your mental game. So it can come in all different shapes and forms.
Right. So it's just figuring out, like, where are you really? And that's hard. Like,
right.
And again, like, asking the people around you if you can handle that, take it on. I would say, as a part of that is, like, learning how to practice. I mean, pretty much everybody up there is just hitting golf balls. They're exercising. That's the vast majority of what we do, and it's one of the reasons, like, Erica doesn't like generally just hitting golf balls up there because it doesn't feel like it's productive. Like, is this actually making me better? Like, she learns a lot better on the golf course really quick, and I find, like, that's the way golf instruction used to be. There's value there, but there's also value in the grinding, getting on the tech, like, doing that. I had a wonderful lesson with a guy in here in the sim the other day because of the fact that we had the numbers.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm amazed that you could see all that. We haven't used any data at all. And I showed him, like, when we made those changes, how much better his motion was. I was like, look, those go together. It's like, how do you see all that? It's like, dude, I spent 10 years under a guy who
how
did it
many
for 50.
millions of swings I've watched,
right, and
alongside
the tech, right? So you can begin to see those things. But it's really neat for him to like, he's getting to the level where he needs to nuance. So having that as a practice tool is very helpful to him.
That was fun too when we were out here on the range just 20 minutes ago talking about, you had the TrackMan out, you were swinging, and I was telling you, was that heel, was that toe, was that low? And I was just trying to make sense of, I was putting in my hours like what you've done, trying to see the golf swing,
right.
confirm it with the tech, and figure out what it is. But I think that's also another point about getting better, which this will probably go into the Breaking 70 podcast, but would be just a more full understanding of the golf game, the statistics, everything that you have to do in order to play at that elite level.
And so if you'll notice too, so this will tie in, we'll talk about this a little bit in the Breaking 80, but like if you're practicing, you have to have a singular line of thought. Right. So like Jack kept asking me questions about, what do you feel in your legs? What do you feel in this? I'm like, it's literally not on the table. So I'm going to completely ignore it.
Yeah.
I basically ignored the question without ignoring the question, like not even thinking about that. So what are you trying to do? Like, the nuance of that face to the right or to the left. It's like, that's been my history of my problem. I'm just trying to hit a high pull. Right. So like I'm exercising the mental discipline to go, I'm working on this. So like in figuring out, and I knew you were asking to understand and like those components, so I didn't have a problem with it, but like people have a hard time when they're hitting on the driving range or playing on the golf course. You're going to get suggestions from people who are not qualified to give you input.
Yes.
And they can't see the larger whole and the larger picture. They see the one shot or the two shots or the three shots that are in front of them. They don't usually see it through a correct lens. So it's probably muddy at best. B, like they have no ability to see that golf swing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months, 12 months down the road. Like when I'm looking at Micah's golf swing, I've had these dialogues with Elijah. I said, I have to move here, here, and here. And in order for him to be ready for that in 18 months, 2 years from now. Like I'm trying to get that ready 2 years from now, but I can't make a massive jump there. I have to slowly massage that because he's had a lot of success, right? I have to slowly massage that because he's in competition all the time in order to push it over that hump.
Yeah, there's
you have to have that wisdom to see that far.
100%, and so few people have that. And when people are out there trying to give you input on the driving range, they think they have this X-ray vision where they're like, "Oh, you're doing this," but I know from my personal experience that if I don't do that, I hit the ball well. But that doesn't say anything about the person who's hitting on the mat. So there's just that's probably another something that we should put in the what bad golfers do is give you advice on the range.
Oh yeah, that's on the list. They give each other advice on how to swing the golf club without any context, right? And any knowledge. Watching YouTube videos could be up on the list, right? Or Instagram videos. Like, teaching one of the staff kids here, he's like, and he's looking to a better player, which is smart, right? He's only been playing golf for about 3 or 6 months. And he said, yeah, he's told me to draw it. I need to set my face closed at address. And I was like,
oh no.
I was like, that's not wrong. Like that'll make the face closed. But I said, dude, the very first lesson I gave you showed you how to draw the club face. He said, I'm just telling you, like, I'm doing everything you asked. I was like, don't do what he asks, right? Like, I like that he's running it by me, but he's muddying the waters over and over and over again, right? He just keeps putting in more information, and this is how people get the list too long. Like, I've shared this story before. We had Vijay Singh's early caddy on earlier this year. Like, Vijay has done that same water bottle drill for 25 years, at least as long as I've seen him do it. And Tiger Woods has done the same putting drill. I remember them showing that like 2 or 3 years ago, and somebody was, you read through the comment threads, there's a number of people say he should probably stop doing that putting drill. I was like, the fact that he's doing that putting drill is the reason he's being successful, right? Like the reason companies like Chick-fil-A, like Apple, like whomever you want to pick is successful over time is they say, this is who we're going to be, and they just continue to do that.
Oh my God.
That's it. Like I'm going to get, if you had one thing, like just try to do that one thing. We did this in the Breaking 90 podcast, right? Do that one thing for an extended period of time. Just get better at doing that. And I get it. Like people are trying to help. They mean well. And sometimes the stuff is good. But you've got to have the wisdom and knowledge to know where it fits in. And that's hard.
Completely agree. All right, so moving on here, you got to make your practice harder. You got to go see an instructor. And then one thing that I would want to add on to this list of how to get into the season is going to be putting and chipping 75 yards and in.
Yes.
Just get that feel down, chip onto the green, 2-putt everything, and I promise you'll love where you're going.
Yeah, I think there's kind of to the practicing point, right? It's like, what do you practice, right? It's as much as you can practice like you play. So
well, the reason I bring that up is because, and I mean, listen,
right.
golf is it's a big game that you can play many different ways at many different skill levels. Okay, I want to make sure that
and everybody's better or worse at different parts.
Correct. However, one thing that really frustrates me is when I see somebody show up, they go onto the driving range and they immediately start hitting their driver or like a long iron, or just start working on clubs that they're really only going to pull, anywhere from 1 to 10 times around.
Yeah.
We got to practice our putting. We've got to practice our chipping.
Right. And you're going to do that on most holes. You're going to do putting on almost every hole. You're going to hit some sort of drive on every hole. Like, I'd rather somebody just come out and hit drivers, putt, and short iron, like wedges putt under 120 yards, right? Like, if you did those three things, that's 70-ish% of the game. Like, you can kind of fake the rest.
Oh my God.
You can,
yeah.
You can kind of get away with a whole bunch. So it's I agree with that. I think that's wonderful. And in terms of the hitting golf balls, we had a guy get 2 buckets. You saw that today. It was like
200 balls.
That's 200 golf balls. And he's in his 60s, late 60s. I'm out there in my mid 30s going, dude, Eric and I have lost focus. Our techniques are better than his is. Our competitive experience is higher than his is. Our knowledge of how to practice is higher than his is. And we hit less than, we got 2 medium buckets and we didn't hit all of them. Like about 50 golf balls over the course of, we were out there for an hour and 20 minutes or so. Slow, deliberate practice, like practicing effectively. 200 golf balls, he's going to be done at 35, 40. He's like, I took 4 Advil. Like, that doesn't, like, dude, that's not it, man.
It's not how you drop your scores, that's for sure.
No. We will come out and exercise. That's a great way to exercise.
Dude, I have a...
you're going to burn some calories.
If you had an unlimited free schedule, and just, this is your only project, you get paid however much you need to live for this one project, how good do you think you can make somebody with 1 golf ball? They can only use 1 golf ball to practice. So this is like chipping, this is putting, this is like but you can only use 1 golf ball. You don't get to go get a range bucket. You can only use like anywhere from 1 to 5 golf balls.
You do a lot of putting work.
You do a lot
of wedge work, right? You do a lot of up and down work, so you don't waste your time with the wedge. Like, if you chip the wedge up, you then go putt it, and then you go hit another wedge shot. So you don't just waste the time walking up to walk back.
Like, maybe just teaching on the range, or teaching on the course. Excuse me.
Oh, it would be, you'd fix the golf swing on the golf course. There would be, so only 1 golf ball. Like, there'd be a lot of drill work. Like, we just learn how to move correctly. We talked about the right arm only swings. Like, there'd be a lot of those drills like that. We just learn how to move well. We learn how to move well. Solves a lot of problems. Actually, I'm really glad you asked that. Because I was stuck there for a second.
Yeah.
I was like, only 1 golf ball. Like, what would yeah. We do swing work on video and like swinging at tees. And then the 1 shot, like when you've done all the practice reps, you're ready to hit 1 shot, you can hit that 1 ball and that's your day.
Which I think could be, you can go.
I actually have done something similar to this.
Well, what I'm saying about the 1 golf ball is you can hit it, but you got to go retrieve it in order to hit it again. You don't just get to hit 1.
Yeah, but you couldn't do that on the driving range.
No,
right?
You're right.
Like,
you're right. You'd have to do it on the course. You'd have to do something.
Yeah. You have to do it in a field, like.
Yeah, but I seriously, the only reason I bring that up is because there's so many people who will just buy large bucket after large bucket after large bucket, and they get nowhere. But if we could use one golf ball, how good could we make somebody? And I seriously think that a lot of this goes back to your cracking the code course that we do every single winter for people who don't just want to start ramping up at this time of year.
So I gave a guy an exercise. His name's George. I hope George is listening to this podcast. I think he will. But I told George, I said, all right, I'm going to give you a challenge. And this is hard. Like, he committed to it for a little while. I think he's still doing it some, but he's not really doing it like we did before. Because he didn't do it today. He was sitting next to us. But all right, you walk to the driving range. You've got your bucket of golf balls. If you hit the ball incorrectly, like if you don't hit the shot that you want or some, within a margin of error, and you don't make the correct movement, your driving range is done. Your range practice is done.
I love that.
So it's the one ball, right? Like, you get one shot to do it right. Because guess what? On the golf course, when you go to that first tee, you don't get a breakfast ball. Like, that's the ball you get.
What's the podcast name?
Like,
No Mulligans.
No Mulligans, right? Like, don't take, like, when you keep hitting balls on the driving range, ooh, this is good. When you keep hitting balls on the driving range, you're assuming there's a mulligan that's coming. We have the solo tomorrow and Saturday, right?
I love this when you bring this up.
So, like, the hard part about the solo, some people actually shoot the same score. They get 2 mulligans on every hole and two jokers, which can only be used for a putt anywhere in the tournament. Guys and girls will shoot the same score. Not all of them. A lot of them will shoot the same score that they would had they played their own golf ball, because they know there's another one coming. There's a cushion. So we talked about. Schwarzenegger's talked about it. Like, they're like, what was your backup plan? It's like, I didn't have one. I was going to do this, and I'm going to be successful. I've got a guy that's coming down, from when he graduates college, it's going to work to play professionally. He's coming down this summer. And, parents are looking for a backup plan, and I'm going to give him some space to, like, be able to make some money, but make him work the evening hours so he can play and practice all day. But I'm standing on that driving range and hit golf balls in front of people. But, like, there is no backup plan. If there's a backup plan, you'll default to it when things get hard. Like, when things get hard is when you have to press in. That's the challenge of there's not another ball. Like, yeah, you've got more there. People are like, oh, just one more. No. Like, no more. This one. Like, walk off the driving range hitting it bad. And he had to do this for a few weeks. Like, when I gave him the one golf ball, George is like, all right. And he would send me back a picture of his bucket. He's like, I'm walking home with this. And it was a full bucket of golf balls. More than one. Like,
I love that.
But it forces you to go, if this was the only ball I ever hit, if this was the last golf ball I ever hit, how intentional would you be with it? That's the most extreme that you can get.
It's so good because, I think that is what a lot of these people who, if you're listening to this podcast and you think that it aligns with, how you go out and play the game, I think that there's so many people out there who get their warm-up bucket of balls. They go out there, just hit around a bunch, hit a few, think they're going to be good, and then they go to the first tee, and, they shoot off the moon because every single ball that they hit on the range, there's always another one to reload.
There's always another one. It's like, I hit it so good on the driving range. I go to the golf course and I don't do so well. It's like, that would be like in basketball practice, never doing, this would be the equivalent. You never run an offense. You never run a defensive pattern. You just shoot all around. However, like when you get tired, you stop. Like all those things, and then go, all right, we're going to play a basketball game. Like, we're going to go play a pickup game tomorrow. Are you in? And then, like, you don't get a break. Like, you'd be toast.
Yeah.
Because you can't, I don't care how good you can shoot it. I don't care how good you can dribble it. Like, if you're not dribbling against somebody, you're not shooting against somebody, you're not having to run an offense, like, there's no defender. Like, you don't practice those other sports that way.
No.
Why do we practice this one this way?
Yeah. You got to be purposeful. You got to be intentional. And to be frank, if you don't want to be, this might sound harsh, but like if you don't want to be good at the game, like, and if that's really what you love about the game is just going and hitting range balls and playing an occasional round with your buddies, We love that. We support that. That's another part of why Franklin Bridge is Franklin Bridge.
Right.
But if you want to get better, and you probably do if you're listening to this, making your practice harder and being more intentional about the shots that you hit on the driving range or ever, period, that's going to be key to you getting better over time.
Right. And, it's deciding to do that. Like, it's up to you to do that. Nobody else, right? Like, I can't make you do it. You like, we can barely make ourselves do it. So it's like, go out and practice intentionally. Don't just hit balls. Like, that's just not effective. It never has been, never will be. It's and you're gonna get stuck. If you get stuck, it's because of that. Like, practice well and then start playing. I think that's the last one to end on. It's like,
I love that.
You have to go play. Like, I'm not saying play more than you practice, but you got to play a lot. Like, our phrase this year and going on forever is going to be learn, play, perform. Like, that's going to be our thing. Like, Nike's just do it. Ours is learn, play, perform. Like, you have to learn what it is you need to do. That's in every possible area that you might consider: mental, physical, training, the skill, practice, strategy, you name it, right? But you have to learn, then you have to play. Playing requires competition. Playing requires against other people, in front of other people. Playing requires you to get uncomfortable. Playing requires you to actually go on the golf course and play a single ball. Not, one of the things I don't like is people will miss one out on the golf course, a short putt, and they'll wait for everybody else to putt, and they'll go back and they'll hit it again. I'm like, no, that's your way of trying to, like, make yourself feel better. That's all that is. You're just taking a drug at that point, right? You're trying to deflate the pain. No, go to the next tee, feeling the pain of that. Sometimes you got to leave the range hitting a good one. Sometimes you need to leave sucking, because you're going to sit on that. You're going to have rounds that you finish, and you're going to be upset that you finished on you tripled the last, quad the last, whatever.
Well, and I think what you're saying also expands to a greater point as well, which is the mental fortitude that you have to have. And this, again, might be peeking into the breaking 70. I don't necessarily think this is for, warming up in the season. However, to your point, like, if you miss that and you got to go to the next tee with that pain, or you're bringing up the driving range, leaving if you're sucking, I don't necessarily like leaving on a good one if you've had a horrible range session, because it's a comfort blanket. Ooh. It's a comfort blanket that you're putting on when you get in your car. I would rather you be so frustrated about the way that you are performing that then you sit with that, learn how to get over that mentally, and then go back to the range the next day or whenever you're practicing next to know that you have to do it right.
Oh, man. Dude, I haven't thought about it that way. If you've had a bad practice session, don't end on a good one.
Not to saying that you can't try and turn a bad session into a good one.
No, but I'm saying you got like 3 golf balls left. Why don't you just go ahead and leave?
Yeah, you're not going to turn around your whole session, your whole practice just by those range balls.
That's good.
Just by those 3. So
dude. And if you do end on good ones, great. You pull it together, right? But, like, use that time to reflect on, like, man, I really missed. I had another gentleman taking lessons walk by the other day. He's like, it was a terrible session. He had sent me his last 3 practices were awesome. He said it's so much better. He played once, has played so much better. Best he's ever hit on the golf course, and he had a bad practice session. He's like, I think I have an idea what I was doing wrong. Just couldn't quite get it changed. I'm going to go think about it. He's like, just a bad day. Didn't end on a good one. I was like, great. Like, good. That's a guy who understands, like, it's a journey, not a, like, every day has to be good.
I think there's 3, this is just me thinking off the rip. I think there's 3 massive elements in golf. You have the swing piece, getting your technique right.
Yep.
I think you have the strategy piece, knowing how to play the game.
Yep.
And then I think the third piece is the mental piece, which is the headspace piece, which is how you learn how to go to the next hole after a birdie and make a par or better, going to the next tee with a mission and not letting yourself have 3 doubles in a row. Like, you have to train that part of your body, and you can't do it by doing what you said. Just taking the drug afterwards, you know, hitting a mulligan, hitting 3 more until you finally hit a good one. No,
even if you don't take them, it's that
like
extra.
I did that early in my golfing journey,
which I was okay with,
which was great because I learning to hit a different shots, and if you hit a bad one, like you need more practice on that specific shot, right? So may as well do it while you're there. However, when you're trying to really significantly drop strokes, no mulligans.
Like they got to go away.
They have to because of that. You're taking the drug. You're not doing yourself any service, and that's why the podcast is named No Mulligans. It's not because we're trying to be hard. It's because you're trying to train that mental fortitude.
You have to have that, and it's the other sports, especially the team-oriented sports. You have the chance to sit the bench, like even if you're not sitting the bench. Let's say baseball, you're a fielder that's had 2 errors. Even if they don't sit you for the entire game, you get to sit while the rest of your team's on offense, right? Like you get a chance to sit and reset. Golf, there's no sit. There's no reset. There's no pulling you out of the game. There's no calling timeout. Like even in tennis, you can call timeout, right? Like there's these resets that you don't get in golf. Like it just keeps going until the round's over, and so you have to train for that.
And frankly,
that's a thing
for the people who are listening to this. And I know there's a lot of people who are listening to this who might hear my story and just think that I can learn everything super quick. Right now, I am in that trench right now of putting up frustrating scores and having to live with it for the back half of my round if I'm not performing that day. And so
I remember that text from like a month ago.
Yeah. And it's just like, number one, it's not fun, but number two, it's 100% necessary in order for me to then push the boundaries, which I've had some exciting updates since then.
We'll talk about those in the next podcast, but it's like, I think there's that, not just that mental piece, but like it's the reflection of life, right? Like you can't make excuses for everything that happens to you in life. Like there are things that happen to everybody in varying levels, right? But it's what you do with those and the successful moments that really shows and reveals the character that's underneath. And that character takes training, and it takes discipline, and it takes not just listening to your emotions and your feelings. Like, I just feel terrible. It's like what that leads to, if you don't control that emotion, it'll control you.
And one blessing in my life, man, that I think golf has brought me is if you train that properly on the golf course, you can then go and take that into life, period.
Absolutely. I got a text from a guy earlier this year. He's like, I know I haven't seen you yet this year. Part of it is I stepped away from the job I was in to start my own business. And he said, I think about this all the time. You said through cracking the code, this was the previous year, you said, you can do hard things. You can do hard things. He said, I can tell you that like every day that I run into something that's really difficult starting this business, he said, I just remember you can do hard things. You can do hard things. And like that to me, at that point, I don't care what you shoot. Like, that matters.
You've now integrated that into his psyche,
right? Like that's inseparable from him. He's gonna face something somewhere down the road. It doesn't matter that he remembers me, right? Elijah was a part of this too, but he will that will become a part of his identity. Of he's taking command and control over the difficult things in his life, and we all have them coming. If you haven't had any yet, they're coming. Right? And if you're in the midst of them, there might be more coming. They might relieve. It doesn't matter. It's not letting up. Like the game of golf never lets up, and when you let up, it bears down. Oh, this is an easy hole. How many times have you ruined an easy hole?
A lot.
So, for me, that's that's where we're at. And it's get out there, practice effectively, get a lesson, practice like you play, and go play. But when you play, choose the new you and choose to step into the hard stuff, not away from it.
Love that. I think that'll get you ramped up for spring. I think it will.
Absolutely.
If you listen to this podcast, do what we're saying here, I think you will be happy with your game by the time June comes around.
Oh, absolutely.
Love it. Well, we're going to sign off here. Remember, as always, guys, remember to subscribe, give us a thumbs up, 5 stars, wherever we are at. It really helps us when other people are trying to find golf podcasts. If they're trying to break 80 or learn how to ramp up for the season, that would really help them find us. So that's one thing that you guys can do. Appreciate it. Another thing, we're recording our Breaking 80 after this.
That's right.
Highly
so
requested.
For the next one.
So stay tuned for the next one. We love you. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.
There's one